Live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It dropped this morning at 6 a.m. You can give that a listen. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, wherever you get your podcast. Geoff Mosher, Adam Kaplan host the podcast right now. It's Geoff Mosher solo on a Wednesday. Plenty to discuss as the Eagles offseason. You know, it's less than a week old, and it's like as the world turns. What is your favorite soap opera, Geoff Mosher?
I never really watched soap operas until I met my wife, who happened to be at General Hospital. I think that's the one where it's all mob people, right? General Hospital.
I can't answer that question, but
yeah, I think it's all mob. I never realized that. I thought soap operas were like kind of a little bit different, but the General Hospital I think is all about the mob, if you can believe that. And so I got hooked into it for a little while. I haven't watched it lately.
My grandmother used to say, "Get out of the room! I want to watch my story." We used to watch like
here's the thing about a soap, Mike, that you can actually not watch a soap opera for like a good 2 or 3 years, then start watching it again, and then realize that the storylines are all the same. Like all the characters are pretty much the same. Everything,
yeah.
It moves so slowly that you didn't really miss that much.
Yeah, it's like watching a movie on the Hallmark Channel.
I was waiting for that.
That I don't do much of.
Like a Christmas movie on the Hallmark Channel. They're all exactly the same. Like somebody's stuck in some small town,
Yes, it's always snowing. There's always 30 feet of snow on the ground in those movies,
too. They can't leave. They're kind of stuck there. They meet somebody, and at the end, that person is so great that you are willing to live in, like, Jamesonville, Idaho, instead of moving back to New York City.
Right, and you discovered all of it through the love of Christmas, right?
Exactly.
That's how it ties in.
Because Jamesonville, Idaho is known for how great Christmas is.
Maybe that's where Carson Wentz is going.
Exactly. That could be it. Andrew Brandt was on the show Monday, said this, Geoff Mosher.
The option that I've always come back to is kind of the boring one. People like to talk about a trade to Frank Reich, a trade to the Patriots, whatever it is, giving back money. I really think the only option, to me, is 2 words. Fix him. Fix him. Fix him. This is not someone who's never done it.
That's the only option. Fix him. Is that the way the Eagles see it?
Well, I mean, I think, and you heard Howie Roseman and Doug Pederson on Monday pretty much speak very glowingly of Carson Wentz. And as we sit here today with so much uncertainty going on, I believe that they would love to be able to bring him back and fix him. And that I believe that any discussions that are going on right now about the future of the team are geared toward what they can do to fix Carson Wentz. I guess the question I would have for Andrew and anybody else is, if Carson has made up his mind and decides that he does not want to be fixed in Philadelphia and he's going to play hardball, and we've already seen some cues in the media that through the media that he's in that position, then what's the recourse for that? Because in order for them to fix him here, he's got to want to be fixed here.
That is 100% true, but don't the Eagles kind of have say over that? I mean, he could say, I want to be traded all they want. They could say, well, we have 160 million reasons why you're not getting traded.
Yes. I mean, they absolutely could, and so they have to kind of make this decision to what you're alluding to. What if Carson, makes a big stink and continues it, but the Eagles say, well, too bad you signed your contract, you're here, and we're not going to deal you. What happens there? The Eagles have to decide if that's the kind of ugliness that they would want hovering over the franchise going forward. I would put that's probably high on the list of the many grievances that they've got to figure out here in this offseason, which promises to be a very interesting offseason.
Do you think your bread's done?
Yeah, something's going on. The toast.
That's my phone.
Do you think that there would be a lot of teams willing to just go right in on it? If the Eagles said, look, Carson Wentz is available, Howie's phone's nonstop ringing?
Well, is it ringing? Yeah. I mean, there are teams that need a quarterback, and I'm sure there are teams that would like to have Carson Wentz. But the question is, are the Eagles going to get enough compensation? Are they getting a first-round pick? I don't know that teams right now look at Carson Wentz and the season that he just had and think that that's worth giving up a first-round pick for them to try to fix. It's like you total the car, and then you're trying to pawn it off on somebody, and you're asking full price for that car when it hasn't even yet been remodeled or anything like that. You're just not going to get the value that you should expect in return for a franchise quarterback, you're going to probably get offers that are, commensurate with a quarterback who played in the bottom third in the league. You may get a decent, maybe someone gives you a third, maybe someone's willing to talk a second. I have no idea. It might be conditional depending on how Carson goes, but that's not the situation that the Eagles would want to be in, because then that forces them to have to trade a guy, get less than ideal value in return, and start all over at the quarterback position.
You got this other situation where the fracturing of this relationship, as it's being reported, is if you bring Wentz back and you have an idea that there's a fraction of the relationship, are you surprised that Pederson is safe? Like, wouldn't you have to say, I have all this invested in Wentz, there's a fracturing of the relationship, I have to think about salvaging Wentz, and the only way to do that might be to see if a fresh start for him is the best scenario.
Well, this is something, Mike, that I brought up on the pod. Adam and I have talked about on the podcast, where it seems like the cart may be before the horse here in terms of what's going on, or just maybe the perception of what's going on. I think people have assumed that Doug is definitely coming back because he did the interview, the media press conference with Howie on Monday. But I mean, we all know that I can tell you, I mean, there was a meeting, that happens at the end of every year with Doug and Howie and Jeffrey, and that started yesterday. I don't know what resulted in that meeting, and the fact that nothing's really come out makes me wonder what these conversations are like, how receptive each side is to any changes that are being talked about. I have no idea what's going on, but I do think it would be interesting if you have a quarterback who's basically said, I don't want to play with this head coach anymore, and you're bringing back the head coach. Does that mean you've already decided that you're not bringing back the quarterback, or that you've decided you're going to make the quarterback do some things against his will because you have that power and leverage? These are all questions that I don't know the answers to, and I think we have to wait and see what happens, what results from these meetings that are going on right now between Jeffrey and the coaching staff and Doug and Howie. What changes are being asked to be made? What and what will it look like after those changes are made, and how will that impact the quarterback position going forward? It's almost impossible to answer right now without any more information.
So, out of these meetings with Jeffrey, is there a possibility they do an about face and Doug and the sides separate?
I mean, I would say that there's certainly that possibility. I know that the report from, I forget who it was from ESPN, whether it was Schefter or Mortensen last week, said that, the team was expected to retain Doug Pederson, and expected is an interesting word. It doesn't mean they definitely are, right? It just means they're expected to. So I guess what that suggests is that whatever changes they want to make, Doug's going to be on board with. And if he is on board with it, then I'm guessing then, he'll be able to keep his job, or, whatever recommendations he's asked to make, we'll have to see if Jeffrey is on board with those. But I do think that anything, and we said this in the podcast, nothing should be considered etched in stone right now. There's just too much silence going on around the organization. We know the meetings just basically started yesterday, and there's a lot of things that they have to talk about, not just the quarterback, right? And but also the defensive staff. They need a new defensive coordinator. There are personnel, cap, money. All of these things have to be discussed as they try to plot the future of this team after a 4-win year. So that's a lot that's on the table.
Do you personally think that bringing back Doug Pederson is the right move for this organization?
Well, here's what I said in the pod that dropped today, Hunter, that I don't understand. This is not me putting my own opinion. It's just trying to look at it objectively. If you're the owner of a team and you want changes, and the changes have to occur in the coaching staff, that to me is an issue, because that's not, in my opinion, the job of an owner. An owner is supposed to have a head coach who's able to hire and fire his own coaches and knows which coaches need to stay, which coaches need to go, shouldn't have to be told, shouldn't have to be, enforced upon him. So if I'm an owner of a team, and if I think for a couple of years running now that my head coach isn't doing a good enough job with his coaching staff, then I would think I need a new head coach, because I think it's a bad model to have an owner making these decisions. That's not my personal feel on it. Now, I'm not saying Doug's a good coach or a bad coach with that. I'm just saying, like, if I ran a business that way and somebody's in charge of my business and they're in charge of bringing in people and making sure those people do their jobs, and yet year after year we're constantly changing the people underneath, then I'm going to say, wait a minute, this person who I'm putting in charge is not doing what I've hired him to do. And so that is the confusion for me as to why this continues to go on. And we see all these changes year in, year out. And it makes me wonder what Jeffrey is thinking about Doug's competency in that area.
Is the worry becoming that Lurie more and more is hiring people that you're saying they're not doing what I'm hiring them to do, but is it more that Jeffrey's not allowing them to do the job the way it's supposed to be done?
Well, I don't know that at all. I mean, look,
right. But I'm just saying, I don't think that we ever thought that Lurie was a problem.
I'm not saying Jeffrey is a problem.
No,
I'm saying
not
it's
saying
a problem
right.
if an owner thinks, right, that this is what he has to do. So it's either, you're right. So it's either a Lurie problem, a Doug problem, or a both problem.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I don't think most fans ever said the owner's the problem. Like Sixers fans, like Josh Harris needs to sell the team. Well, you don't hear that as much anymore because you got Morey in there and he's kind of changed the perception. I think as long as Roseman's in there, the perception is that Roseman needs to go. But part of it might be that Lurie likes Roseman there because Roseman's not going to push back on him.
Well, that might be part of it as well, Mike. I mean, the bottom line is I don't know who is specifically doing what, right? I just know that this team has changed coaches year after year after. I mean, how many wide receivers coaches have they had in the last 5 years? 5, right? Mike Groh gone. Then we'll see what happens with Press Taylor here, and we'll see what happens with the Marty Morningwigs and Rich Scangarellos. Like if they're in and out, like what's going on here? Where is there the disconnect? Clearly, these moves were made last year at this time. The bringing in of Marty, bringing in of Scangarello, bringing of Andrew Briner to help the offense. Well, the offense got worse. Somebody is responsible for that.
Keeping it with Doug Pederson, there were reports yesterday about a sideline situation with him and the message that he was sending. Kelsey came out today and somewhat shut it down. Have you heard anything about that situation, and what are your thoughts?
Spoke to one player yesterday about it, and I'll preface by saying one player doesn't speak for an entire locker room. This is just one player who did play in the game, and I asked him if he observed anything like aggressive behavior to Doug, and he said if that happened, you'd have to show it to me, meaning like he didn't see it, so you'd have to prove it to him that it happened because he did not see anything like that. And then he told me that he knew what the deal was and that he wasn't mad about it. And, again, that's just one player's opinion, but, you'd have to ask, I guess, all fit. Obviously, Miles Sanders felt a little bit differently, but he didn't play in the game.
I have a problem with Miles Sanders. I mean, he didn't even play in the game and apparently was healthy enough to play, had the game. That's some nerve to be a kind of a healthy scratch. And, I mean, come on. I thought that was
he may have been speaking out of place.
Yeah.
I mean, I think his heart may have been in the right place. I don't besmirch any player who says they want to win a game or they're not happy with the way it's handled. But right. I mean, he did pass his opinion off as the locker room opinion, and I don't think that's Correct. Necessarily the case.
Yeah, and it's like maybe you didn't get the memo because, oh, by the way, you weren't active this week. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
That was, but I mean, obviously, just adds to all the circus that has happened around this team. I want to ask you, Geoff, about, we asked, what's the biggest question about the Eagles this offseason? And I think a lot of people would say, who's the quarterback? Okay, that's fine. But the problem is that to get to that answer has so many layers. So realistically, when they finally figure out where to start this offseason, where do you think Roseman, Pederson, and Lurie start?
Well, I guess the coaching staff, I feel like the coaching staff, the offensive coaching staff, and the quarterback situation are 1 and 1A. I mean, they clearly have, even if Carson winds up never being an Eagle again, right? They still got to make sure that what happened to Carson never happens to their next quarterback, whether it's Jalen Hurts or whoever. So they've got to have the right people in place to be able to coach this team correctly so that they're not constantly shuffling coaches year after year and expecting some different result. And then you can extend that also. You need a defensive coordinator. That's going to be a huge move for this team to have to make going into the future. They're assembled a certain way. The team has drafted and acquired players to fit that Jim Schwartz model, that wide 9, go heavy on the defensive line. the type of defensive lineman that get upfield quickly. I mean, if they hired a defensive coordinator, in the next week or two who likes a 3-4 and he likes the 2 gap with big, 350-pound defensive linemen, well, then they got to make a real quick makeover. So, but that's really, to me, secondary to the coaching, the offensive coaching, and the quarterback issue right now. Got to figure that out.
Well, speaking of the defense real quick, a name that came out to me internally would be Matt Burke. Do you think that that's someone that's realistic and would be able to do a good job here?
Yeah, I mean, he's someone that I was told does want to have that job. He was a defensive coordinator in Miami. I mean, it's not breaking news that a veteran position coach wants to be defensive coordinator. I feel like Marquand Manuel, who is also a defensive coordinator in Atlanta, will probably want to get his hat in the ring there, or at least be interviewed. And it might make some sense to keep some stability, knowing that the personnel you have is built a certain way. But I certainly wouldn't limit my thinking to just in-house candidates. I want to know who the best defensive minds out there are and what their plans are. I want to, if I'm Jeffrey Lurie, I want somebody to knock me off my socks like Brandon Staley did for Sean McVay in LA and get someone who I think is a visionary. And then once I got that guy, then I worry about transforming my defense and getting my personnel to suit that guy or that person's schemes.
Do you, on the defensive front and the coordinator stuff, do you read anything more into Schwartz other than he doesn't want to coach anymore?
I know there's been some talk about his health not being great. I've kind of got mixed opinions on that. I don't think he's in any grave danger or anything like that. I know that he's not always been the most popular guy within the NovaCare complex. He can rub people the wrong way, and maybe he probably hasn't found some of the guys he's working with to be the most popular people as well. I do think there's a part of this where Jim is just like, you know what, I might coach again, but it's probably best to do it somewhere else. It's time to move on. I'm sure that that sentiment is in his mind. And to be honest with you, I don't know his contract situation. It might have been up. I don't know that the Eagles were definitely going to bring him up.
Yeah, his contract was up, and they just said he's going to allow it to run out. And that was essentially that. Now, I had read when the news first came out was that the Eagles approached him at some point, and he just was not really interested.
Yeah, well, then that kind of goes to show you what's been going on at the NovaCare complex the last year or two, if not longer. I mean, there's just I've often said, and I'll say it again, I think the number one goal for any good sports franchise is to have everybody kind of pulling together in the same direction and on the same page. And there are times where I just don't get the sense that that's happening with the Eagles.
You've been screaming safety for a long time now when it comes to adding something to this defense. A lot of these mock drafts, though, with 6th overall, has Parsons available. Would that intrigue you?
Didn't we? Well, I thought you guys asked me this the other day, and I yelled at somebody for even asking.
That must have been Gil.
I said most mock drafts had Parsons going number 6.
Yeah, I know that you're really into having that. You've been screaming for it for a while, and I know that. And we had DeCecco on yesterday. He said versatility is big with this. He's not just a linebacker, and I know that's something that you look for, that safety Malcolm Jenkins type role. And I didn't know if that was something that you would
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought he was kind of a linebacker. I don't know if he's the type of, maybe he's kind of like an Isaiah Simmons type now where he plays multiple different positions. But I think that, you guys have seen this team long enough to know that they place a priority on the offensive line and the defensive line. And when they pick in the top 10, 80% of the time, it's going to be an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman, and there's always the outside chance, I think, for this draft that you could see wide receiver because there are 2 who are considered top 5, top 6 kind of guys, and you can certainly add another wide receiver to this group and upgrade it. But I just don't think philosophically that they would take a player like Micah Parsons. And I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just telling you that, of course, I'm a Penn State guy. You guys know I love Micah Parsons, but I just don't see this franchise going that direction.
Today, Jason Kelce basically tweeted out that, hey, there was no problems on the sideline. We knew Nate was going in. So does that make you feel better going into the offseason that maybe this isn't a circus, the culture of the locker room isn't in danger here?
Yeah, to be fair, I never felt that Doug had lost the locker room after that game. I thought a little bit was being too much made of it. And that's even before the report came out about him being, I guess some guys trying to get at him. So again, from what I've spoken to, it's not, the players are not like anti-Doug now. There's no mutiny going on because of that. And so I have a lot bigger concerns about the future of the franchise for other reasons than that.
All right. We got plenty more on this offseason, of course, which will be huge. I mean, this is big. I mean, pick number 6, Howie said it the other day, we have to hit this. He also insinuated, Jeff, that they were really aggressive in 17, 18, and 19, and that because of that aggression, they maybe are in the position they're in now because they kind of went for it in those 3 years. Is that like an acceptable thing to say and then be like, okay, then I can give you a couple of years of downness because you went for it for that 3-year window?
Well, the thing is, when you have a quarterback who's supposed to be really good, right, you're supposed to be able to turn over a team and still be competitive. So I don't think a 4 or 5 or 6 win season should ever be accepted under the premise that you're turning the roster over. If the team hadn't broken the quarterback, they probably would have won a bunch more games this year because there were some games that were winnable that they just completely bottomed out because of the quarterback play. I think it's acceptable to say you may not have a 12 or 13 win team. You may not be in the NFC Championship game. But look, the Seattle Seahawks, they turned over their roster. And, yeah, it's taken them a while. They had some seasons where they were only in the first round of the playoff, but they were always competitive. They always had a chance. And I think you've seen that with a lot of franchises that have really good quarterback play. You can stay competitive while you turn your roster over. So I don't think there's any excuse for saying the Eagles should be satisfied or accepting of winning less than 7 games a year.
I would agree with that, and I would only turn and ask if they don't have the injuries that they have, which is a part of it, but this was a historic injury year. Are they a 4-win team?
No, probably not.
Like, they might be a 7-win team if they have Brandon Brooks and Lane Johnson and Andre Dillard and
Yeah, injuries are a part of it. I mean, but every team has them. The Seahawk offensive line was beat up for years and years and years, and Russell took a beating, and they still would win 9 or 10 games. So I'm sure if I go through, the same thing with the Patriots and the Packers and the Saints, they lose players. They have to turn the roster over at times, but and then I know the Saints did go through some tough times before they had to got back up there. But it shouldn't really be accepted. I mean, you can win and turn over a roster at the same time.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. If you want more Eagles, get the podcast. It dropped this morning at 6 a.m. They'll have another one on Friday. And this offseason just getting underway, but it is going to be a fun, bumpy, wild ride, and we'll be there the whole way during Football at 4. Thanks, pal.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.